They know how to take care of their cars. They know how to manage their house and to be able to feed themselves, clothe themselves, and to, you know, if something happened to me, God forbid, they could run the house. So that created a really big picture of where we wanted them to go. And the other thing I always told the kids was, I'm not so much interested in you getting a degree, although I encourage it. I want you to be able to function and be able to support yourself as an adult, whatever that looks like. So, you know, I ended up using quite a bit of business books, you know, like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and some of those other kind of business books that help you formulate mission statements for your companies. I took those things and formulated mission statements with my kids. And we have, you know, some guiding mantras that we use, such as life favors those who are prepared, and work before play. And, you know, we're made to make mistakes. Allah made us in a way that we're supposed to learn from our mistakes. So making mistakes is how we learn, and we take the time to learn from those mistakes. And making mistakes is good. So creating those safe environments for those kind of, I could keep going. I'll let Brother Muad speak.
No, mashallah, you're doing a great job. So I think you touched upon a few things that we also did on our side as well from my family's side. I think, you know, when you look at it, all parent wants what's best for their children. This is basically, there's no parent that you're going to talk to that they don't want the best for their children. Not only that, they always tend to say, I want to see them better than me. Right? So there is no doubt in that. But subhanAllah, the problem is, what you tend to find is there's no book that tells you how to teach your kids, what to do with your kids, how to make them see them in the way that you want to see them. But when you look back, when you actually analyze things, subhanAllah, our religion has the answer to what we need to do and how we go about formulating a vision for the family. And it's actually very important when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ وَبِذَلِكَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Indeed, my prayer and my rites of sacrifice, my living and dying are for Allah, Lord of the Lords. No partner has He, and this I have been commanded, and I am the first among the Muslims. So if you look at that, that is literally a vision statement for any family, specifically a Muslim family. So I think what we did on our side is similar to what the Sister Mona was saying. You go back to the essence of our existence. What are we here for, right? And we, alhamdulillah, we've been blessed, you know, growing up that we have a lot of people that were handling our upbringing, not just our families, because of how we were raised back home and so on. But you don't have that luxury here. You are it. It starts with you, and it's going to end with you. If you don't drive your kids to the masjid, or if you don't take them to be with the right crowd for them to be influenced, it's not going to happen. So, but
or bring the right crowd into your house.
That is
oftentimes where I would go pick up other kids and bring them to my house and host them at my house, because I could set the ground rules of, you know, people are more important than things. We don't tear each other down. We only build each other up. So there are very specific components that we made sure happened. And it was easier to do it in my place where I set the ground rules.
You control the environment. I mean, that's important. I totally agree with you. So when you look at that, you then ask yourself, hope is not an answer. So hoping that your kids are going to be what you think they should be is not an answer, right? Because you need to have a plan. And the plan starts by the vision. So we went back and we said, okay, so what is it that we want? If you achieve as a family, like Sister Mona was saying, having the respect for each other, being a good Muslim, and what I mean by that is being truly a Muslim that lives Islam in the best form that you can be. You're representing, you're an ambassador for Islam, and you're proud to be that way, right? You're not afraid to show who you are, because showing who you are is only a good reflection on the religion, and also on it could be a great impact on others, right? So being being helpful in the community, or that whether that community is the Muslim community or the community at large that includes non-Muslims, right? So be a true impact, right? So that's another thing. So living Islam in the best form you can be, growing in it and showing your true character, and also being whatever you do, you got to give it your 100%, right? So I think those are the elements that, to me, if you put them in your vision, you're encapsulating what you are. You're living the life of a Muslim as you're commanded to be, and performing it at the highest best. So you start from that. That would be what you have to encompass in your vision. At least that's what we looked at from how we looked at it. And I like the concept that you said, Sister Mona, about looking at it from a business perspective. Businesses live and die with mission and vision statements. That is their guiding principles, their North Star. If you don't have a good vision statement, you crumble as a business. So I like that.
But one of the things you're talking about is aiming really high. It's
Yes.
awesome to aim high, but it's good to know where the floor is, right? So it's like I looked at it like zakat, right? Zakat is the bare minimum you have to pay. And sadaqah is the way far away aim, whether you want to give 5%, 10% or more, right? It's the same with your kids and in terms of their education. When I first had my kids, I tried to think of me being like Prophet Noah, right? He preached for 800 years to his family, and his son still did not become Muslim, right? So living in this society, there is that chance that we will have children who will not be Muslim. But it's our job, the bare basic minimum, to educate them and to love them and to guide them to the best of our ability, right? We're not making them Muslims, and we're not making them doctors or lawyers or engineers. We're giving them knowledge, and we're giving them a safe environment in which to grow, right? And then it's trying to foster those good character traits that help them be owners of their education and owners of their deen.
I agree. I think you're right. There's certain things you're saying there that I think are very important. You're giving them means and ways for success, right? But you don't know if they're going to succeed or if they even gonna use it to the best they can, right? But what you have in hand is the ability to give them those opportunities. And one thing we have to always remember, and I think this is something that we have, all of us have to always keep in mind, that the main tool that can give us success is dua.
Definitely.
And for our kids, it's the most important thing, in my opinion, beyond the vision, beyond the mission, beyond the goals. If you don't constantly ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you guidance to help them being guided, we're wasting our time, because you're losing the most powerful element that we as parents have.
Right. We had little mantras around our house, especially when the kids were younger, to help keep them focused and keep them part of our team. And one of the things I always, sort of like a call and response that I would do, I'd ask them, what's the goal of life? The goal of life, Jannah. How do you get there? By making Allah happy. How do we know what makes him happy? We go back to the Quran and we read and we talk about it and we discuss, but there's when there's conflict in the house, we go back to that. What's the goal, guys? Jannah. How do you get there? Is what you're doing making Allah happy, or it's not? How would that, sometimes it's both people on both sides. Both of you did something not quite right. How do we work this out? What's going to get us to the right space?
That's true. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for starting us off on that, the big picture of what we really should be thinking about as parents, especially like starting with the being. And so my question for you as a follow-up is, it looks like, there's the long-term and short-term vision. So it seems like the advice here is definitely to start with the end in mind, whether it's, obviously Jannah, inshallah, and then other things like looking at the document that Sister Mona was talking about, where do you want your child to be? What are their strengths and things like that? How do you guys formulate your short-term vision, I guess? Or how do you kind of bring it all together?
As in day-to-day practice?
Yeah, I would say year to year, day to day, maybe like elementary, then it's like middle school, then high school type of thing. Do you break it down more than that?
For me, it was very kid dependent, and also what that child was capable of at that particular month. I had 3 very late readers. One didn't read until he was almost 12. The other 2 didn't read till they were 10 and a half. So, I didn't want them labeled in terms of reading disabled, but they were very intelligent in many other ways. So making sure I fed what they're capable of and gave them lots of life skills as younger kids, so they were empowered to think that I'm capable of doing stuff. So, you know, when you've got a 10-year-old riding a 36-inch mower doing commercial mowing, they're like, I'm not dumb. I'm capable of doing stuff. I'm just not able to read right now because God hasn't let my brain grow in that direction yet. So trying to help them acknowledge, not that we didn't try, but we didn't beat our head against a brick wall. We would look for things where they were ready to grow and do and be. And then if there was a weakness, we either held off on it or, you know, tested it from time to time to see when they were ready to challenge that. So that often threw me outside of what the norms were for their grade level in school.
Yeah, I think when it comes to basically having to set some or basically short-term vision is mainly having to determine what is it that that you want to work with the child on, and that like Sister Mona was saying, that really depend. It's different from one child to the other for multiple reasons. Every child, like you said, learns differently. Every child has different activities that they want to be part of. So you need to tailor some of the things that they're attracted to or they're good at, but also add to it things that they're not as good at to try to help them grow in it. And that would become more of the challenge that they have. So I think one of the things I heard from somebody, so the way we go about doing that is indulge them into a conversation of the things that they know and they want to do, right? Mm-hmm. What is it that how do you want to grow in that particular activity? Whether that activity be, you know, sports or studies or whatever the case might be, you need to nurture that because that's a good driving factor for them to help them build their character. So that's one, yeah, and their passion, you're right. That's one portion. The second portion is the one that's a little bit more painful, is working on the things that they are not happy to work on, but you want them to work on it because either it's necessity or it helps them be a complete person in society. And you leverage this to actually get them to do the things that they don't want to do.
Work before play. Again, another mantra at our house, work before play. So if they had, you know, to write in our copybook, maybe they couldn't read, but they could copy. So they do a copybook for 10 minutes in the morning. That's what they had to do before they could go play with their Legos and listen to their stories. So, you know, chores in the house, things that had to get done before they got to go off and do all the things that they really enjoy and play passionately about.
Yeah, and I think for the older kids, I think what one of the things that I've seen done is you basically start the accountability a little bit more, right? So you not only you set the short-term vision or short-term, I think on a mission you set goals, mm-hmm. right? So you can sit down with the child and talk to them about, okay, so I know that you're doing X, Y, Z. What are the things that you want to achieve by the end of this year? So they tell you, okay, I want to be, let's say in soccer, my son plays soccer, so I just want to take that as an example. Yeah. So he wants to be much better performant in a game, as an example, right? So you look at it as the goal. So now you work backwards as to what are the things that you need to achieve to work on the weaknesses, work on the things that elevate your level, and so on. Or if it's Quran as an example, one of the things that you can ask them is say, I want to memorize, let's say, a juz by the end of the year, or 5 juz by the end of the year. So it makes it simple for them to piece it out for them and help them in actually owning their goal, right? And owning their action. So if you tell me I want 5 juz by the end of the year, I can tell you, and it's just, there's so many pages and you have 5 of them, how many days you need to memorize every day, how much you need to memorize every day. Now let's put an Excel sheet together. Let's put a plan together so that you can see whether or not you're achieving your goal. And then you can check back with them every week, every month, every 3 months. And now all of a sudden you're building that accountability in them without you putting that pressure. The pressure is on them alone and they own their growth.
Right, you're goal setting with them in terms of you're giving them ownership of that education, and that's really what you want. You want them to be self-starting, and you want to help them learn those habits.
Yes,
exactly.
and help them build in habits as well. I think the most important piece is in building habits. I think some of the minute you allow the child to build good habits, you've gained a good person in society that actually can contribute very well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it looks like wait, from what you're saying, the vision is more than just academic. It's not just, okay, by the end of first grade, I want my child reading chapter books, or, you know, by the end of middle.
No, academics, I think, is actually the least on the list in your vision. You really want to look at your holistic life, right? As a Muslim family, you're trying to raise an adult, right? That's the whole purpose of the educating your child. You want them to be a functioning adult who can support themselves in society.
So taking that, and that definitely is key, because I think all parents want to know that their children are going to grow up and become just what you said, successful adults functioning society. How do we though balance the child's input into this vision? So, for example, I think, you know, based on public school trends, we know that like by second grade, a child should be doing multiplication, or by the end of a certain grade, a child should be doing this. I guess what I'm wondering, and some parents are asking, is how do we balance, you know, what we know are academic goals based on the norms that we have in our society, and what our child may be showing us they want to do? How do you balance the child's input and what are benchmarks that we think they should be achieving?
I question the benchmarks that you're talking about. I completely throw them out the window. You know, I take a complete step back and look at Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, right? He could not read and write. He was a highly intelligent man who, you know, ran a business successfully. So I think you need to look at the person, and I think you need to look at a bigger picture. These benchmarks that we're giving for our society that we're living in now, yes, to some degree they're important, but I don't think that it's critical in the elementary school years. There's so much that they can do within a short period of time between the ages of 14 and 16, and even 16 to 18. It's amazing, right? I think the core foundations of giving them a love of learning, giving them the love of exploring the world. Like there's so many verses in the Quran that talk about observing the world that God created, right? We have algebra, we have the astrolabe because Allah told us, stop and look at the sky, stop and look at the plants, stop and look at these things that I created, and you will see the patterns, and you will see, you know, it's because we were told to stop and look, right? The Prophet ﷺ went off from days where he would just go and sit and think and ponder. We don't give our children time to do that. We need to give our children time to think and ponder and observe the world and explore and be tactile, and to really like feel Allah and feel the creation of the world that He gave us, so that they can have this love of exploration, so they can lead us into a better future. So I buck your I really throw out those cores. It's very, very hard. The hardest thing about homeschooling is to change the mindset and thinking that you have been trained into, and to get out of that box, right? We've been put into this big box, and we need to break it.
Thank you. Brother Mon?
Yes, yeah. I agree with Sister Muna to a certain extent. I don't know how much I can break that box, but I get what you're saying. I think homeschooling is an experience. It's an experience that you have to embrace. If you don't embrace it, you're basically, if we're doing it as a checkbox type of a deal where, okay, I did 2 hours of math, I did 1 hour of Arabic and so on, you're missing the essence of the whole thing. It's an experience that both the family and the child is doing. You're doing an unconventional way of teaching. And because of that, you have to remember that it is, the child is learning, no matter what the child is going to be learning. So you got to be happy with that first step, because you've made a sacrifice that is for the benefit of the child. the other additional thing is that they're learning far beyond just the academic piece of it. They're learning a lifestyle. They're learning a way they're developing a way of learning on their own, a responsibility and independence. There's a lot of values that you don't get if you were to be sitting in a classroom with 30 more kids or 20 more kids. So I remember a quote that my wife had told me a while back of a lady that said, in your worst homeschooling day, your child is better than most of the days you're being in a regular school. So that, I hope that at least assures the people that were asking the question that you will be, they're fine. But you need to leverage the pace of the child and in making sure that they are learning at their pace and adjusting to how they learn. That's what you have in your hand. That's the power that you have in homeschooling that you don't have in the regular class. One child can learn visually. You actually can teach them on a visual way. The other child learns through books. You use that. And now, alhamdulillah, with all the resources we have, you have online access to a lot of online resources. You can have teachers that can have that can come in and reinforce things online without having to move out of the house. There's more in hand that we can use that we didn't have before. So yes, if you are interested in making sure that the academic piece is portion is done, just make sure that you do it with the child embracing the learning portion, and you also don't feel like it's a burden that you have to get done. That's
Brother Muad, I love what you're saying about kind of working with your child rather than imposing kind of your own desire to achieve something. So can you give us an example of maybe some way that this kind of is a real world application of that with your children or other children, how you might kind of adapt, or like you were describing, how you might take the child in mind in an academic subject or something where the focus is on what they can achieve rather than what you want them to achieve?
Yeah, so sure, I'll try to. I mean, the only examples that I can give you is obviously anything that is from my family, nothing else, right? So I think that sometimes, so one of the subjects that one of my children was having problems with is math, right? So I'm a big fan of math. I like math. I grew up basically doing a lot of taking a lot of courses in math and all, and the tech, or some of the ways that we went around trying to get one of the children to do it is by basically saying, okay, so you own it first. So they went ahead, they were doing well, and then all of a sudden started slowing down in their path and all. I personally did not want to intervene because I wanted that child to actually pick up the responsibility on their own. Part of it is also making sure that the character is being built, right? Because at the end, I'm not going to be around. My wife is not going to be around. The child is going to be a human being that is an adult in society, and you want to leverage these situations to flip it so that they can learn from it and benefit. So that basically went sour pretty quickly, so we had to intervene. And then what I had to do is I didn't want to just come in and say, okay, I'm going to sit down every day teaching you math and so on. I knew that the person can do it. They just needed to get the discipline in place to do it. So in talks back and forth, the child came back to me trying to get some of the feedback to see how they can turn it around. And that's all we needed. So I know the personality of the child, and I knew that if I were to say I'm coming in with my force, it would turn them away pretty badly, and that would not get a good outcome. Instead, alhamdulillah, they reached back out to us, to me, sat down with them a couple of times, and all we needed is tricks left and right, and alhamdulillah, I mean, they're doing fine. So I hope that's a good example.
Well, thank you. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to say for math, math was a big challenge for me because I'm not a big math person, but, and my kids went through times where one was really good, one wasn't so good. So I did a couple different things. I did real life math in terms of giving them a weekly allowance, where I used that also as a money management teaching tool. And I started that early on. So I taught them to save short-term, long-term, and for college and zakat, as well as have some spending money. But the other thing we did was, when we were home, under Virginia law, you have to have proof of achievement. So having that conversation with the kids, even when they're, 6, 7, and 8 years old and they don't want to sit down and do these workbooks, you're like, well, the government says in order for you to be home, you need to do this. So how are we going to solve this problem? What do you want it to look like? And we would rotate through lots of different curriculums while they experimented to see which one worked for them. Sometimes they did worksheets, sometimes they did Matthew C, sometimes they did like an online prodigy game, so they did lots of different. I had kids, we would dialogue back and forth, and I was willing to either borrow, get from the library, purchase lots of different types of things that would satisfy this curriculum for the state requirement in terms of helping them. But it was, again, a back and forth dialogue with the kid to figure out what worked.
So piggybacking on that a little bit, I think one of the things that parents actually are really struggling with is just really understanding how to get the opinion perspective of children, of young children, teens and tweens, and on this family vision or this homeschooling vision and setting goals. And so I know you guys have talked about it, but if you could give some more kind of concrete or practical examples of how really, maybe how to sit down and talk to them. Do you guys have family meetings? Do you guys just once a week say, hey, so-and-so, let's see what you've done so far? What are some practical things that you do to really talk to your kids? And Brother Moaz, I know you have a really young one. So even if you sit down and talk to your little one, who's I think going to be 4 soon, if you could talk about that, and brother and sister, because we are getting those questions. What do I do with my preschool kid? How do I get them involved? So it's so great that parents want to start this conversation or just want to start in investing in their children early. But I think we're kind of stuck on how best to do that.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not sure about the 4-year-old child, although he actually has a way with me, so it's a little harder on the from that perspective. But I think we use a couple of different things, at least in our house. So for the younger ones, the talk is a little bit it's not going to be as deep as the older ones, or at least the teenagers, because the teenagers are already have formulated opinions. They want to say that we're here now, we exist, and so on. So you got to leverage that to your advantage, and I'll talk about them separately. But for the little ones, I think you start the conversation by asking questions that are going to direct them to feel like they're part of the solution, even though you know that the outcome is really, you're driving towards a certain outcome on your side. But you get them engaged, you get them to actually feel that they're part of the problem, and they feel that ownership as well, right? So it's not going to be the same as a teenager, of course. That's a lot different, but it is to at least get them to talk. My 4-year-old is a little bit not there, I think, but at least my 8-year-old is. And you want them to start feeling that, they thinking through problems, thinking through how they get the problem solved, and the steps that they need to take, and also the accountability piece of it as well. Because reality is, life is not, you get every action that you take, you're going to be responsible for it, whether that's at work, at home, or outside, or it doesn't matter. So as far as the older kids, and I think we started this probably when they were 8, 9. I believe that you need to show your kids a path, right? And you need to give them options within that path. And if you do that, what tends to happen is they start seeing a vision. They start seeing the vision. They start seeing where they can be and how they want to take it, without taking away from what they want to do, right? But at least you tell them, hey, if you go this way, or if you have this path, this is what you end up doing. If you have this path, this is what then you bring them back to it. You bring them back to that vision by making sure that any step they make, you remind them of what they were planning on doing, how that impacts their plan, and so on. That's sort of the dialogue that we have. Sometimes, and I know that probably my kids by now, they hate my speeches, but I would sit down with them and just tell them, remind them of the things that we talked about, remind them of the actions that they're making now and how that's not helping them in the future, or the actions that they're making now, how it's making it easier for them in the future. And just push them. Sometimes I like to try and see what the outcome is, and then come back and analyze with them so that they can see what's going on. I hope that answers the question. I'll let someone to talk.
I think the one thing you probably left out is that you're probably modeling that behavior in your own business that you're running, right? Your kids are probably seeing you do that. And
yes.
that's a big part of it, right? In terms of creating vision. You know, for my kids, I told them, I don't really care what degree you get. You don't even need to get a college degree. You need to be able to support yourself, whether it means that you start your own small business or whatever it is. You need to be able to generate an income where you can support yourself, and you need to be an upstanding Muslim, right? That who can function in society. My husband's on the other extreme. He's like, I'd love you to be a doctor and have an MBA and a PhD, and, you know, inshallah, we'll even own the FedEx Center. Right, so there's these huge extremes between where I am and where my husband is, but both of us are giving them options. Like, where do you want to go? How can we support you in your future dream of what it is that you want to do, right? So, and we model it. We do it together as a family. So you're saying, when do we have these conversations? We have dinner together almost every day. Somewhere in the day, we have a meal together. It may not always be dinner. And then we have these discussions when it comes up. Sometimes there's a conflict in the house, or you know, some event happens and it brings it up. So it occurs naturally if you're constantly having conversations and being with your family and creating a good, harmonious family. You will have these conversations naturally, and it comes up. You know, and, you know, you could just say, hey, school's coming up soon, and we've got some deadlines we've got to hit for the county in terms of notice of intent. What do you think you want to do this year, right? And what do you think what that looks like? And again, for me, homeschooling was every few months, we may end up changing curriculum just because that particular one wasn't working for a kid and we need to move on to something else.
I think the last thing I add, sorry, Sister Khadija, the last thing I want to add is you take into consideration every child's personality as well. Yeah. Some children need the push, others need to be told, and others are more of, you know, just a reminder is enough. And sometimes you know, you gotta touch the right spot and the right ego so that you can push them in the right way, right? So, or
it changes from age level, right? So what they're like when they're under 7 years old versus what they're like when they're, you know, 7 to 10 or 11, and then when they hit those 11, 12, 13 is different than 16 to 18.
But I think, like you said, Sister Mona, the conversation is, to me, the most important thing. You have to. I think you look at the Sirah of the Prophet and you look at the Sahaba, some of them at 12 years old were like men, basically. In their actions, they were better than people my age at this time, right? So they were you know, either strong, or they had good decisions, or they made an impactful moment in our history of our religion. So why, when you look at it, they were treated like adults. Yes, at an early age. And I think that's, if there is anything you want to take, you want to implement that in your child, and treat them like they are adults, even though they're not always going to be that. They're still children, but show them that, you know, you're conversing with somebody like you're talking to your spouse, right? So all of a sudden the child's attitude changes. The maturity level is a lot faster than their counterparts. You know, how many kids we've met that are 25 years old or even 30 years old and act like they're still 15. But then you see another child at 12, and subhanallah, you're like, mashallah, this kid isn't, you know, is mature. And you see what we do sometimes is, I like to watch kids that have been successful, because it's inspiring to see kids that are at a very early age, that they have done something that is great, and it starts from nothing. It starts from a drive and a vision, and having working towards something, right? So I'll stop at that.
So to kind of summarize, and let me know if you guys feel like this is accurate. It seems like what we're doing here with the vision is that we are showing our children that they're valued, they're important, giving them confidence and building that up in them so that as they get older, they're able to make bigger decisions and have confidence in their skills. And it seems like you are constantly reassessing. So it's not just like, oh, once a year at the end of the year, we're taking our assessment, we're assessing, but the reassessment process is a constant process happening maybe on a weekly basis, maybe daily. And it can be informal where you're having conversations. So it doesn't feel like pressure, or it can be formal where you're like, hey, now we've got to figure out, we have some end of year requirements to meet and figure out. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think the goal is to empower your kids, right? And help them learn to make decisions early. So
it also seems like you guys are talking about being very observant and knowing your child. So being the expert on your child as they're evolving, because they're constantly changing, and doing that through learning about children. It seems like, Sister Mona, I know you've shared a number of books that we are going to be sharing with parents in our resource documents, and Brother Moaz as well. It seems like understanding also, what the Sirah and what the Quran and our tradition has to offer, and understanding how the Prophet ﷺ taught and worked with people to help them really achieve their potential. And so one of the questions we had was, what if your child gets to a point, maybe they're 18 and they're older, they're not at the point where you really can get away with telling them what to do, but or as easily you can influence them, and they're lacking a lot of skills, such as the habits that make them successful, such as completing tasks on time, not procrastinating. How would you support a child who's older and not there yet? What are some tips for that?
I don't have a child at 18, but I have an idea about what I would do. I'll let Sister Mona has experience talk first.
Oh, I don't know. If you're talking about a kid who's gone through public school and is at that stage, you need to treat them like an adult and see them as an adult, and find a way to make friendship with them so that they will be willing to take your advice. 18 is too late to try and really change anything. They're already an adult and you're in your advisor stage. And if they're not willing to listen to you, you've missed the boat. I don't know if there's any dua.
Yeah, dua is definitely.
Dua is the first thing. And then finding a way for you to back up and see them for who they are, the way they are, and learn to love them with all their imperfections and stop saying that they're failing, right? Love them the way they are with all of their imperfections, and accept them the way they are with all of their imperfections. And then maybe they'll be willing to listen to some advice about how to go forward. Otherwise, try and find other mentors that you can get them around that they would be willing to listen to and use as a mentor. But yeah,
so I think sometimes you get to a point where the kids have gotten used to your talk to the point that it's it doesn't have the effect that it might have on others. But the first question I want to ask you, Sister Khadija, to respond back to your question is, are they not as good as you want them to be, or are they good? It's just not, or are they need help, right? Because sometimes we do muddy the two together.
Yeah, I think that the person who was asking the question was saying that, mashallah, in a lot of ways, this child is great Islamically. The areas that the parent would like to see the child kind of grow and improve are like the habits of, completing tasks and being motivated. And
there's some people who never, ever necessarily complete their habits or have good habits, but they still function in society and they still do well. I mean, there's just different types of. There are people who are pilers versus being people who always file things, Yeah,
and I think if you want them to change that a little bit, you have a couple of things. You got to let them fail sometimes, and you have to be okay with letting them fail, because that's one way to learn. Sometimes you got to go through the pain and then realize, what, I need to change something about myself. And the people go through that, where you have a turning point where you finally look at it and say, what, enough is enough. And I know people might have talked to that person multiple times, and it just never resonated. And it could be a click, or like Sister Mona was saying, get somebody who can influence that to change it. The other action is actually take that action together, build that bond, like Sister Mona was saying. So look at the things that you can do together to get that level of giving them the confidence if they're lacking confidence, or just getting them to recognize that things have to be finished, that it is part of our DNA to actually make sure that if we do something, we do it well. Like the Prophet ﷺ said, رحم الله عبدا عمل عملا فأتقنه. So you try your best at trying to achieve that goal, and work. Talk is not going to be enough sometimes.
There's a very fine line when we're talking about this age of 18 and, you know, completing task or doing something just so, and especially when it's between a parent and a child. That child has a whole history with you as the parent, and they're listening to what you say from a certain window, and it's usually something like, my parent wants to change me because they don't think I'm good enough. Whereas what they really want to hear from you is, God made you this way. I love you because that's who you are. And if you choose to change and do better, that's your choice. But I'm going to love you just the way you are because you're my child. Do you get the distinction? Do you get the distinction?
But I hope, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us all, but I hope that by the time you get my kids get to 18, that we have become friends, because I don't want them to. One of the things that we try to at least work hard on, at least on our side of the family, and I know we're not perfect. I want to make sure that everybody knows that.
Right. None of us are perfect.
Yeah, we need to build a relationship with the kids, because in this society, in today's society, the kids can fled away from your hands very quickly.
Right.
And if they see you as a fearing authority, you've lost your child, because they will get somebody else to listen to them, even though they have bad intention, right? That person has bad intention, and then you basically everything crumbles in front of you, and all of a sudden, the task that they didn't finish sounds like it's not a big deal anymore, right? And you would rather get your child back more than anything else. So we need to be. It's a thin line between the two, but I think building a good, sound relationship where they see you as an advisory role, as a person with wiseness, as a person that actually they're okay telling you they messed up,
right?
And even if it's it's hard to swallow,
it's okay.
Yeah, it is okay, because it could be worse. Yes. And I would rather not, I would rather have them fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before they fear me or my wife, because we're not going to be with them. And sometimes we even say it out loud. I'm not going to be with you. I'm not with you when you're actually doing things. Guess what? I might find out about it. You might be in trouble, but that's not a healthy relationship, nor that it is healthy for them. I think one thing that we learned, at least back home, I remember, my parents were not with us most of the time, but I remember that there was the family instituted the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also love of Allah, don't get me wrong, but the fear of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, that all of a sudden you start thinking, oh, when you do something that you know you're not supposed to do, you feel bad about it, and you have that remorse. If you get that to that level, alhamdulillah, I mean, that's enough for them to get their own guidance and balance their decisions on their own.
Right. So it seems like really at the core of this family vision is relationship and love, right? So without relationship, without that feeling of love and support, the family vision could essentially be meaningless.
And empowerment. I can't emphasize how much it is important to empower your children, to let them feel safe in making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, right? To, if they make mistakes while they're at home, whatever size of mistake it is, it's going to be way smaller than if they're out in the larger society and make a really huge mistake, right? It's so much better, right? And teaching them that love of learning and that empowerment, like I cannot express to you how important it is to help your children feel like they have power over their lives, right? And to connect with Allah and what He's gifted them in their abilities.
Yeah, you're right. I think empowerment is a key component in all of it, because you can use that based on the child's level, child age. The responsibility grows up and down depending on what the child and where they are in life. And if you build that, you've built a complete human being, because they have everything that they have in hand to be able to do whatever they need to do as tasks altogether. Um, I think the earlier you start,
Yeah, I mean, I remember before we started this, Khadija, I was telling you about how I have this money management thing. I was doing math with them. And at the age of 3, you know, or 2.5, 3, when we're at the checkout counter and they want to buy something, I'm not gonna buy it for them. I would start giving them an allowance. So at 3, they get $3. But they didn't get that whole $3. They always had to divide it into 4 equal parts. So they had a pocket money for instant gratification. They had a small jar for something they're saving up for, where they'd take a picture and put the amount in. They had to save up for that. And then they had a college jar. So at 3, they're saving for college. And then they had a zakat jar. So every time we go to Friday prayer, they had money to put in for the mosque, or give to somebody, a homeless person on the street, you know, if we want a field trip. So every week they're putting this money in the jar, and they're seeing, and they get to count it, and they get to, you know, so by the time my kids are 16 and going to community college, they're taking that college jar and they're putting it in, and I make them go to the bursar and pay their tuition. And they see how long it took them to get the money to pay for that 1 semester of college, right? So they really have an appreciation, but they're also empowered, because they have that short-term jar where, you know, if they want to get an American Girl doll, or if they want to get a hovercraft, or if they want to get some app, they've been saving up for it, and it takes them a while to get there, right? And then at 12, I don't give them any more money beyond $12 a week. They have to start earning money. And so that makes them think about, how else can I get additional money? What else can I do to earn, you know, some extra cash? Maybe I can go help my grandparents, or, you know, so sometimes they volunteer and they do stuff and they don't get money. Other times they think of a way they can earn money. And again, empowers them in thinking, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to get it, what the thing I really want? How do I? So I'm trying to build business thinking skills as well, right? Life skills. Because there are going to be times where like COVID, people have lost their jobs with COVID, but how else could they be earning money? What else could they be doing? There's many ways. So teaching that out of the box thinking.
Yeah, and so one of the questions we had, Sister Mona, was if you could give an example, and I know you did now, but maybe someone's looking for a more specific example of empowerment and learning from making a mistake. If you could kind of help people get a concrete idea of what that might look like.
Geez.
Put you on the spot.
I'm just trying to think of most recent thing. So we have a couple of cats now, and we now have fleas because the kids didn't keep up with the, you know, the flea stuff they're supposed to put on the cats. They wanted the cats, they're in charge of the cats, they feed the cats, they groom the cats, they're supposed to put the flea stuff on the cats. They didn't. The cats now have fleas and we get to take care of them. So, you know, we're doing research on how to solve this problem, and learning about diatomaceous earth. And now they get to go around and spread the diatomaceous earth all over the house and let it set for a while. And then they'll get to vacuum it all up. They made a mistake. Is it a life-threatening mistake? No. It's definitely an uncomfortable mistake, right? And we're all suffering from it. I'm not berating them. I'm not yelling at them. I'm like, we have a problem. How are you going to solve it? I give them ownership of it. We do the research together, and we talk about, we formulate a plan, and they will take care of the house. They will spread the diatomaceous earth, and they will clean it all up, and they will wash their cats, and they will put the medicine on the back of their cat's neck so that we don't get fleas. Does that work?
And Sister Mona, you also have your kids do chores from like a young age, right? So I'm sure as they learn to do laundry, they probably messed it up a bunch of times.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we had a lot of things turn pink, and when they put red things in the white wash, for sure.
Better to learn at home than when you're an adult and you have to get ready for work and you're like,
right. And we've lost a lot of sweaters being shrunk up, you know. they learn how to put things on delicate and cold water wash. But yeah, so I lost some clothes. Other family members have lost clothes, or, you know, their dad now has pink underwear. You know,
Oh no.
it's okay.
So we have some specific questions from our attendees that I'm going to ask you guys, and just for the sake of time, if you could try to give brief answers. Mashallah, your answers have been amazing, so I hate to cut you short on those. But one of the questions is, any suggestions for a child with ADHD who has a hard time maintaining a schedule?
Say that again.
Any suggestions for a child with ADHD who has a hard time maintaining a schedule?
It's a process. I would say they have a schedule for themselves, trying to find a way to make it work with yours. It's a conversation and dialogue. And also depending on their age, right? As they grow, it could get better. I know, but you know, the ADD or ADHD, they are capable of being focused when it's something that they really enjoy. Right? So I would do a lot of reading on it, and I would do a lot of experimentation between you and them in terms of trying to figure it out. It's a growth process, and it's a learning process, and it's a dialogue process.
Brother Maude, do you want to add anything?
I was just going to say, you have to lower your expectation and start from the ground up. If you have high expectations, you always tend to feel like you failed, and it doesn't help in building that momentum with the child. So you start small, playful, and then you build on it. You achieve 5% today, that's 5% better than yesterday. And then so on until you find a good balance between leveraging their concentration time versus the time that they cannot, they don't want to focus, or they cannot focus. I think that would be the...
Remember, growth spurts go up and down, right? It's never always a steady climb. There's some forward and there's some back and there's some ups and down. I mean, that's normal. So knowing parameters of what's normal and being okay with the forward and back process.
And I think I just want to kind of bring up again that whole what you guys have been talking about, cultivating the relationship and love, and not doing like the backhanded compliment to kids where it's like, oh, you did a great job, but if only you had. So I think just appreciating the successes that they're having, especially if they're struggling with something like ADHD, which I think you guys have been kind of emphasizing, just appreciating their work and their achievements.
Well, I think part of it is that you as a parent need to learn to recognize that your child was made in a certain way. It may not be what you wanted, but God gave you this child and they are who they are, right? So they have different growth patterns, and that growth pattern may not be what you like. Tough. He gave you this challenge, and it's your job to change to fit your kid, not the job of the kid to fit you. You're the adult. You can learn to change, and you need to model that for your kid.
And I think the way I look at it is every challenge is an opportunity to learn. So whether that's for your child or for yourself, it's always how you look at situations, right? So two people, and especially on the business world, a situation happens. One looks at it negatively and one looks at it positively. The positive one always wins because they can turn that into a gold mine, into something that actually can help them. Same thing with the children. I do, however, want to say that sometimes we do point out the negative because you need to have a balanced life. You're not always going to be, I don't want to be the one that was always handing out trophies, because that is not realistic. When they are faced with a problem, they will struggle because they feel like they're rejected, they're not appreciated, and that's not what you want. You want to know that, hey, there is sometimes that you're going to be good, some other times I need to point out what you need to work on, because if you don't do that, the person doesn't grow, and also they're not going to be able to deal with the conflicts or issues that arise in life. So
I don't like to hand out trophies at all, period. I actually like to ask my kids, are you happy with what you did? How could we improve? Is there something else more? Right? And to help them learn. I actually have one kid who is such a perfectionist that she can't, like, accept, be proud of what she's already done or how far she's come. There's always something more to do. I'm trying to work on her in terms of learning to teach her to accept herself where she's at and be content with that, but to also strive for more, right? There's this balance, right? If you're always striving for more and never content with what you have, that's a problem. If you're always too content that you never want to strive for more, that's a problem, right? Trying to find that balance. So
yeah, I have that as well. You're right, but I think if you have done your best, you've worked hard, you've done your best, you feel like you've given it your all, that's it. That's enough for you to be happy and content. And being content is a very, very important thing, because I think that is really the problem that can push a family to break.
yes,
If we are sitting down comparing ourselves and our kids to others, from all levels, from learning level, financial and so on, you live miserably. You start putting a lot of pressure on your kids and family that is unwanted and needed, and can break the family apart. And that's very important to, hey, I'm happy within myself for what I have, how I have my kids, and what I'm doing with my kids.
yes.
Let everybody judge me however they want to judge me. You are never going to please people. Make
Right.
sure that your people, your kids, your family is pleased, and they are, you're doing your best to bring them in the way that you think is best for them.
Would either of you have a recommendation for a book on empowering children?
Raising the Emotionally Intelligent Child by Gottman, or The Nurturing Parent. What was it called?
There's another book for 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families.
Yeah, that's a good one too. This one, The Nurturing Parent, by Daisy. It might be out of print, but it was you can get it at the library. How to Raise Creative, Loving, Responsible Children.
I have one which is more important than all. Quran.
Definitely.
And then I think if you want to look for anything, there's nothing best than looking for the character of the Prophet ﷺ in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also a lot of the lessons that we can learn from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think the peace comes from there.
Yep.
If there is anything, if you make sure that you have time for the book of Allah for every child in your house. Every day must be a connection with the book for every child. To me, you do that, you allow them to actually always have, always be in the habit of reading the Quran every day. It starts off the day pretty much in a good starting point, and help in guidance as well.
The way you and you probably do this, but the way you want to do it is a way that they learn to love it or enjoy it, right? If for me, with my kids, especially when I've gotten Arabic tutoring or Quran memorization, if they had a tutor and the kids were not enjoying it, or they were any kind of unhappy, I dropped it. Because from my own experience growing up with my siblings and looking at us, when you have such a negative, even if it's a small amount of negative feeling related to Quran, they don't go back to it when they become adults. You really, really need to be very sensitive about making sure that they have a love and a positive interaction with Quran. And if there's any negative, from my part, I see, don't do it. Because as an adult, they run away from it.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, I think the first thing we worked on is the intention. You want them to nurture the love for the book of Allah before even doing anything, right? Why do you want to read Quran? Why do you want to memorize Quran? It's not a mechanical action only. There's depth into it. There's a relationship. There's a soul searching that you want to get within. There is a connection that you want to build that you cannot buy with money, right? You cannot spend money to get. So I think this, to me, doing that first before you actually start diving into reading and reciting and going to Quran schools and all is important. The second portion, you're right. Quran schools, I think, having to find the right people or the right school is important as well, because building that relationship and strengthening it through a school is important if you have the right people that are teaching it. And I
Even
just,
if you don't go to a school, even if you just do it at home, right, with a
yes, yeah,
private
right.
tutor or something. I don't know if Arabic is your native language and so you're teaching your children both languages, but I don't speak Arabic or understand it. So, you know, when I was forced to memorize and, you know, it was a, you know, you can't go watch TV or do whatever until you've memorized. Now you've made this, he did, you know, not that my parent knew he was doing that, but it became sort of like, all right, you have to do this punishment before you can go and enjoy yourself. Whereas I don't want to set that up for my kids.
Can you, that was one of the questions that someone had asked, mashallah, it just came up while you guys were discussing it, but can you be a little bit more specific about how you make that time enjoyable or just not, you know, not something that children dread? And Mona and Brother Murad, I know you're both very careful about the teachers and people who are teaching your children Quran. If you could talk a little bit more specifically about that, and what you look for in a teacher.
For me, I have my kids take a couple of classes with that teacher, or they may be for a duration of time. But I always check with my children, check in with them and see, do you like it? Are you having fun? Like, most people don't ask if you're having fun memorizing Quran, but my kids need to have fun when they're memorizing Quran for them to be attracted to it. So yeah, I have those conversations with the tutors. I'm like, my kids need to be enjoying this and having fun. If they're not having fun, they're not going to get it. And so, you know, I make that clear when I have that conversation with the tutor before I've hired them. And there have been times I've had to switch tutors. My kids sometimes don't last longer than 6 months or a year with a tutor and I had to go to another tutor just because as they're growing, personality clashes happen or something, and it's time to switch.
Brother Murad, do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, so we tried a couple of different ways. So and depending on the child, we change appropriately. But we have tried online for our kids for the most part, for most of our kids. And then last year or a year and a half ago, I took over to try to help a little bit in that. But throughout the whole journey, one thing that we wanted to always instill is the love for the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that, I think that helped in making sure that they were a little bit more satisfied with whomever is teaching them. But sometimes I do get a child that actually comes back and says, hey, you know what? I don't think this person is challenging me enough, or they're not correcting me, or it doesn't click with me and that person. And I'll be honest with you, I think Sister Moira probably is not going to like this, but to me, I question them before I change. Why? Because I want to test out the thought process versus is it an emotional thing, or is it really built on an actual thing that needs to be addressed? The reason is because sometimes, again, in reality, you're going to be in a job, or you're going to be in a position or something of sort that is not easy for you to get out of, and your actions or your decisions got you to that level. How do you maneuver your way out of it to try to leverage the situation that you're in to turn it into a positive thing for you? But if it gets to a certain point, which it happened before, I just cut it off and change course. But I don't do it automatically. I try to change that. I think last time one of my kids was having a class with the child decided that it's time for them to move back to another teacher. So I said, why do you want to do that? Well, I'm not being pushed as much as I want. I said, back and forth, that conversation just basically died. It had no merit.
Right. No, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. I don't just on a whim change, right. But I would be careful at saying if it's an emotional thing. Sometimes an emotion, and it depends again also on the age of the kid, right? If it's a child under the age of 12 and it's an emotional issue, I'm definitely going to change because that's going to last in their brain for the rest of their life, right? But when they start to hit 13, 14, this is where you can really start getting them to buckle down even with something they don't necessarily like, right? So it's more of a nuanced conversation in terms of, well, maybe we can have a dialogue with the teacher, or maybe there's something they're doing that they could stop. So again, it's not hard and fast. It's more of a conversation that's all of what homeschooling is. It's having these dialogue with your kids.
Yeah, you're right.
So our final question is, I don't know if this can be answered quickly, but it's one that comes up a lot. It's just, what do you do if a child if you're kind of hitting that wall with your child, and the child either refuses to do what you're asking them to do, or your child is not compliant, or they're not with the vision. What do you do in that case?
This is your family. So you've got to figure out where is this wall, right? How can you get them into the family? So are you not respecting them? Is there something that they're asking for? Or there's some need that they have that you're not meeting? Right? So they're, that's part of the place I would go in terms of, again, you can change. Your child is the one that's growing, and maybe there's something that you're not seeing and not giving an allowance for, or you have expectations that they can't meet. Maybe you need to lower your expectations a little bit. So I don't know, it depends. It really depends on the age range, but if it's an academic thing, I would just drop it. For my daughter, I dropped math for 5 years. I didn't do any kind of formal math studies with her at all, right? And in one semester at, summer semester at Nova, she went from, algebra to pre-calc, and then went on to go on to calculus 2 in her college career. So again, you can catch up and forge ahead when the child's ready. Sometimes you just need to give them that space. And it's a really hard thing to do. Like, to really hold yourself back is a hard thing to do.
I think one of my partners, business partners, always tells me this, and I think I learned this over time. The disappointment is always because you have high expectations, and that because of the high expectation, the minute it's not reached, you actually feel defeated, you feel disappointed, and then you start building that distance between you and the child, indirectly. So you have to look at the bigger picture. That's number one. Number two, if it's academic and it's something that you can help, you always have to find ways to maneuver to try to get them to help them in whatever they're fitting in. If it's outside of that, if the bridge, you got to build that bridge between them. You have to open up the conversations, even if they're tough conversations. And as they grow, more problems. I'm sure the sister might probably can speak to that more than I do. But as they grow, they will formulate their own opinions. They will be objecting or doing things different than you are. And it's funny, I know I haven't talked with my daughter, she's the oldest one, and I know that there's certain things that my wife and I have done that she has a different opinion about doing. And I sometimes jokingly talk to her about it and say, okay, so how do you feel about going this route, given the fact that, my wife, your mom and I are doing it, did it this way? And it's good to know where they stand as opposed to them doing it behind your back, because it doesn't help you nor that it helps them. At least you know where they stand. You can actually guide them better. You can provide more of a guidance for them to be successful no matter what. But differences will be there. Unfortunately, our children or anybody, even our siblings, we might be same family and we're totally different. So you just want to make sure that to me, as long as they're Muslim, I'll be happy. I want them to be a good contributing Muslim. I'll be, alhamdulillah, I think I would have said that, I've done my best. Ideally, I want them to memorize Quran. I want them to be, knowing hadith. I want them to be, very successful in life. But if that doesn't have to be, my main thing and the reason of our existence is to be good Muslims.
I want to thank you both so much, Jazakallah khair, for taking time out and for speaking to us on this topic, which really is so important to being successful in parenting and homeschooling. I just want to take a minute and remind